Welcome to the Pastor's Connection podcast, where we delve into the heart of ministry and explore the challenges and triumphs of pastoral life. Join us as we connect with inspiring leaders, share insightful stories, and equip one another with tools for effective ministry. Together, we can foster a community of support, encouragement, and growth in our calling. I am your host, Thomas Osterkamp. Today's episode is brought to you by BroTech Design. BroTech Design is your go-to destination for exceptional web design and reliable hosting solutions. They create stunning websites that captivate your audience and ensure seamless performance, helping your church or business thrive online. Elevate your digital presence with their tailored services at BroTech Design. You can contact them today at info@brotech.design for assistance and to transform your online experience. And on today's episode, we have Kirk Kirkland with us. He is the founder and lead pastor of Revive City Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a church planning catalyst at the North American Mission Board. Kirk, so glad to have you on the episode today.
Thomas, man, it is so good to see you, especially with that good tan you got going on right now. And you always have a special place in my heart because on like our first weekend of existence, you drove all the way, I think from Iowa,
Yes, from Iowa.
just to come help a brother out. So man, you always have love in my heart. And it's good to be just hanging out again.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as we get ready for this episode. Do you remember what year that was?
It's 2013.
2013. Okay, so I was trying to think of how old my girls were because my wife and I came and we brought our daughters, and so we had like tiny little toddlers, and we went to, was it opening?
You went to opening day parade, which is a national treasure, by the way.
Yeah.
Most people would tell you it's the best opening day in all of America, and really, it's kind of like what you could imagine if someone won a World Series and had a parade. It's like that every single year in Cincinnati. So you got to experience like one of the seven wonders of the world when you came. I know you didn't realize it, but it actually happened when you came.
Which is so funny because like that whole thing is lost on me. I'm not a baseball fan. Mm-hmm. So like of all the people to show up and help you like pass out flyers and spread the word about your new church plant, it's like he's here at opening day for Cincinnati.
Yeah, you didn't even know what you were missing, but I'm glad
no
you got
idea.
to experience it. And again, we were friends already, but you can do no wrong. You can never do anything as a mistake in my mind, just because I appreciate you showing that love.
Yeah, so I'm excited for this conversation today. We're going to be talking about reaching lost people in church. But before we do that, Kirk, I know you, I know your family, but many of our listeners don't. Would you mind just giving us a little insight on what your family dynamic looks like?
Sure. I'm married. I will be married for 15 years at the end of this month to my wife, Karen. I always say she's a good Karen, so don't talk bad about Karens. And we have 4 children. My oldest is getting ready to turn 14 at the end of the month as well. And then I have a 12-year-old, and then I have twins. So I have 3 girls and 1 boy. We had 2 girls, and we said, let's try for a boy. We ended up with a boy and a girl. And when God gives you twins, that's his way of saying slow down. And so we slowed down after that.
Yeah. That's funny because I wanted a boy every time, and I got 4 girls, and I'm like, God's like, dude, you're a slow learner. It's time for you to realize you're not getting a boy. So
yeah, we snuck ours right in, and then we were out. So. Yep.
So you're 15.
It's not too late, Thomas. It is not too late. All right. You know what you're probably going to get.
I won't get into much detail, but that would be a God baby right there.
Don't ask Sarah and Abraham about that.
Yeah, yes. I feel it, but I'm like, Lord, please no. Like, so 15 years. You got anything special planned for year 15 as far as how you're going to celebrate?
I'm thinking through it right now. So we're more like, let's take some Friday dates. That's kind of the season we're in right now. I'm taking Fridays off. And so I'm going to a place called the Maplewood this Friday. And so we're just going to go on a date, and I'm going to just kind of talk and see if I can get something out of her that maybe that'll like give me the idea of like, this is what year 15 are going to be like. We do have a couple of like weekend trips planned for this year, but they just don't happen to be around our anniversary. So I'm going to have to come
Sure.
up with something, and I have about 20 days to figure it out.
Plenty of time. So, pastors, you're listening, heed his advice. Get those weekends away. Get that time away and invest in your marriage relationship. I love to hear a pastor talk about the fact that he's got getaways scheduled. So, um, thanks for introducing your family to us. Let's get into your ministry background a little bit, just so people can get an idea of what your experience is like as we get into the conversation.
Sure. Born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. I did not grow up in a family of believers, though they did come to Christ later. And yeah, I kind of had the typical, what I would call urban, inner city experience. But I went to a school for the arts. And then during that time, I was being reached and discipled through a local church that was doing outreach. That's how they came in contact with my family. I had a youth pastor who discipled me. And then I had a very early trajectory towards ministry. So to study, then seminary. And then I came home in my early 20s and was an associate pastor for 7 years at my home church.
Okay.
And then it'll be, let's see here. It is, I guess we're going on 12 years now, if it was 2013, since we moved to Cincinnati, which is an hour south of where I grew up. And we launched the church that I still pastor. I always say I still pastor it because they don't know they can fire me, and I'm not going to tell them that.
Yeah.
I think they're starting to learn at this point, but I'm not going to entertain that notion. But yeah, I still pastor that church. It has been the biggest roller coaster.
Yeah.
Someone termed the phrase "brutal." That's the best way I would put it. It's been
Oh, I
ups and
love that.
downs. It's been lots of mountain peaks and lots of valleys, and sometimes those happen in the same day. But 12 years, and about 2 years ago, we bought our first church building and 5 acres of land. And since then, church has just done really well and grown really fast. And so we're kind of in this new season of like, we're no longer a church plant. It took us 10 years to get to that point. And yeah, so now we're learning what does church growth and being if I'll use this phrase, an established church pastor
Yeah.
looks like from there. So that's kind of the season of ministry. Along the way, we really got into church planting, helping other church planters, sending out a couple of planters from our church. And so, man, it's kind of been, even though we have traversed the season of kind of like, all right, maybe feeling a little bit more stable, we still kind of like mixed up in the church planting world. So that's a big part of what I do for ministry.
Excellent. I love it. And, I think about your journey from Dayton to planning Revived City Church in Cincinnati, and I find it very inspiring, stepping away from your background into new city, kind of in a way, a new way of doing ministry and all that. So what would you say it was that motivated you to take that leap, and how did you go about discerning that calling that, hey, this is what I feel like God is wanting me to do?
There was this great spiritual calling piece, and then there was a great naivete of what it meant to start a church
Yeah.
and what that would look like and how you should do it. And so on the kind of the spiritual side of like God calling us, um, again, it was my home church. I was the associate pastor for my home church that I
Yeah.
grew up in, that I loved and felt beloved. And when I went to tell my pastor, I felt like God was calling me out. He told me he thought I was going to be the next pastor of the church, and I had felt that
Hmm.
was maybe what it was heading towards. I had recently become married. I've been married just for a couple of years. Um, just recently had my first child, and that you begin to think about what does the future look like, and what does it look like for your family, not just for yourself. So that was uh, that was challenging, my paradigm of what that would look like to what is it going to look like to raise my family in this existing church culture.
Sure.
Um, I had always felt and would have articulated a call to be a second man. And all I wanted to do was to be that person for my pastor, to serve at his pleasure, and to bring his vision to life. And then suddenly I was having different thoughts. I was having thoughts of like how I would do things differently.
Yeah.
And I had received advice a long time ago, before I ever even thought I would be a lead pastor, that if you ever started telling yourself how you could do it better, then it's time to go do it better somewhere
Yeah.
else, right?
Yeah.
And so that was happening inside of me, which was hard. It was a conflict because I'm a big person on loyalty, so I felt almost like, am I being loyal to my pastor? And so I had to work that out. Supernaturally in my past, you may have heard this story. I'm not sure, Thomas, but there was a young couple that I went to seminary with who had tragically passed away, who were going to plant a church.
Hmm.
And they were going to plant a church in Seattle, Washington. And when they passed away, I always had this nagging, who will go plant that church that they were going to plant?
Yeah.
And so I couldn't escape those thoughts. And so when it kind of all those spiritual, sometimes I call it holy discontent, kind of came together, it became evident that God was calling us out to start a work. And we wanted to make sure it wasn't international first. We thought and prayed through that. And we thought, no, I think God's calling us to a bigger city. And we have an affinity for like larger metropolitan areas. And so
Okay.
we prayed through New York. We even prayed through Seattle. And what made sense was, why go thousands of miles and to live in a city that we can't afford when there is a larger city an hour south of us? And so we began to pray, look, study, we put it out, and God began to open doors. And lo and behold, we moved to Cincinnati, and we had no team, no money, no strategy. We moved there at the end of December, and we started church at the end of March, which is like exactly how I would tell you not to do it.
Yeah.
And so by the good grace of Jesus, we're still here all these years later.
Yeah, which it's incredible. I listened to your story, and I've got a similar circumstance where I was so happy being a youth pastor. I love youth ministry, and I loved, investing in the next generation in that way. And it was like, I plan to do that for the rest of my life. And one day God was just like, boom, and everything flipped and everything changed. And in that moment I knew, like, okay, I don't know when it's going to be, but it's not going to be long.
Mm-hmm. I think, we all, even now as a lead pastor, you as a lead pastor, we all should be open-handed. We should hold the ministry with an open hand. When I say the ministry, I'm not talking about calling, but like, shouldn't the Lord be able to lead us and change directions? And if God said, hey, I want you to go to Southeast Asia tomorrow, would I be willing, or would I hold that tight and say, no, this is really what I want to be about? So I think since then I've learned that, our loyalty and our allegiance is first to Christ, not to our own ideas. We can make our plans, but God orders our steps. And so I still want to have that, okay, Lord, if you're calling me, I'm willing to go. I'm not looking to go anywhere. I
Yeah.
often tell my people, I know where I want my wife to lay my remains here in Cincinnati. I plan on dying here, but if the Lord calls and changes, and again, for in both of our stories, it happened almost overnight.
Yeah.
Then I have to be open to my loyalty and allegiance to God's direction.
Was there an inner struggle or turmoil as far as like, hey, I could be next in line and take over this large church and have the facilities and the finances and the people, versus stepping into a place where it's like, hey, me and my wife and my small children with nothing? What was that inner dialogue or conflict like for you?
You just named it. You just said it. And God calls people to do both of those things, right?
Totally.
So like somebody's listening and God is calling you to stay in your context and become the next pastor. And whatever that looks like for you, that's what God's calling you to. And for some people, he's calling you out to plant. I think it's easy now in hindsight to see how I'm wired. I probably, if I would have stayed, would have split that church. I would have wreaked havoc, not in a like a sinful way, but just in a leadership style,
Sure.
in the type of leader that I am. Now, could could we have survived it and kind of, so to speak, come out of it and gone to good days? Maybe, I don't know. But now I can see like, oh, I'm a pioneering spirit. I'm high risk and high change tolerance.
Yeah.
Where in our home church, that was the exact opposite of the culture. It was very much more like, this is what we do and this is who we are, and we don't change that. And so what that church needed was someone who was just going to reinforce those cultures and values that they had, where I was going to come as a change agent. So, but as what 30 years old, I didn't know how to articulate or understand
Yeah.
my leadership style and potential, and so I used to use that phrase, holy discontent. I wasn't mad, I wasn't upset, but I just felt like there was a disconnect. For me, it was, lots of different reasons. Nothing inherently sinful, but just seeing ministry and saying, why aren't we reaching these type of people? Why does our church only look like this? Why do
Sure.
we only do it this way? And then kind of challenging and the status quo in my mind, not publicly, not undermining my pastor at all, but just in my heart, in my mind. And then when finally I think I just got enough courage to go, man, it should be different, or I could do it differently. Then it became that, okay, well, if that's what God is doing, then I need to go do that,
Yeah.
And one thing that I think helped me kind of push me was realizing I would never live up to my pastor's expectation or his legacy. Let's say it that way, not his expectation,
Sure.
but his legacy. I knew I would always live in the legacy of what he did. And for me, I didn't feel called to that. I felt called to go build, to be a builder, to be someone who goes in to infect and change and make an impact in my own way. And again, there's different callings, different directions for different pastors, and
Totally.
I'm grateful I had the courage to do that. Now, I'm not saying that transition was perfect, but at the end of the day, it has led me to where I believe God has called us.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you touched on was, hey, why does our church only look like this? Why aren't we reaching this particular group of people or peoples? Why don't we think about doing things a little bit differently? And one of the things I love about you personally and Revive City Church is that you emphasize taking personal responsibility for every lost son and daughter in the city, not just a particular group,
Mm-hmm.
race,
Mm-hmm.
economic standing, or whatever else. How does that vision shape your church's daily operations and outreach strategies?
Yeah. First of all, we discovered that vision and that mission. As I told you, no team, no money, no strategy. We came in, and really what we knew to do was to start a church service. And that's what we did, we just started a church service. And then over the course of maybe about 3 years, we realized starting a church is different than starting a church service. And so we had to
Yeah.
build, what is our mission? What is our vision? What are our values? And so it was years into the plant that we landed on what you just described, which would be a mission and a vision. And it came from, let me tell you two quick stories of where that mission and vision came from. And then let me tell
Sure.
you how it kind of like flows out practically in our ministry. I was in downtown Cincinnati. I was on the heart of the city. I was inviting people to our church, and a gentleman who he looked from his appearance, and then he reeked of alcohol. So it seemed as if this man was living on the streets, and he was maybe living a life of an alcoholic. He asked for food, and this happens a lot in downtown Cincinnati. And so I said, hey, I can't give you money, but I'll get you food if you're really hungry. He said, I am. So we walked to a restaurant. I tried to have a conversation with him. Um, he was not in his right mind. So I came down to the end, thought, well, I've wasted my time here. And then he asked to use my phone to call his mom, who lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And so
Mm.
I dialed the number for him, hand it to him. He's talking to his mom. He's hitting his mom up for money. And then he hands the phone back to me and says, here, she wants to talk to you. And the woman on the other end said to me in the most sweetest Southern voice, Pastor, thank you for caring about my son.
Oh, wow.
And I know that's a simple phrase, but it profoundly hit me that everybody in this city is somebody's son and it's somebody's daughter. And that there was this deep appreciation for caring and showing love and dignity for someone's son and for someone's daughter. The second story, and it happened probably within months of that happening. We were so broke. We didn't even have a trailer to put the stuff in for setup and tear down. Yeah. So we rented a U-Haul. I had all my stuff stored in my basement. We would rent a U-Haul, put all the things in the U-Haul, then take it to the church. Well, so I'm at the U-Haul and I'm telling this individual, why I'm renting the U-Haul and we're starting a church. And I told him where the church was. And he says, oh, well, my brother's downtown. He showed me a picture of his brother and gave me his brother's name. And he said, if you see my brother, tell him to come home.
Wow.
And I thought that's the work of the church. That is the work of evangelism. That there's a long lost brother who's out wasting his life. And we get to be the ones to say, hey, if you just come home, there's a family waiting for you.
Yeah.
Those two stories shaped who we were called to be and plant, which was to reach the prodigal son. And that's the mission you read is our interpretation of the prodigal son. And so that's what we decided to be. We decided to be the welcoming committee for when the prodigal son came home. And that flows out of who we are as a church. And I don't have the exact percentage, but I can tell you it is a large percentage of the people at Revive City Church. If you ask them their testimony, they're gonna give you some form and version of, hey, I grew up around the faith or around some principle or idea of who God is, and then one day I walked away, and then I came back, and we found Revive a great place as we came back. And for some of those people who came back, maybe they were a believer, but they had never been discipled. Yeah. For many of them, maybe they just were around, right, religion, but now they're coming actually to Christ. But we've just become that church that reaches prodigal sons and daughters. And then what we learned on the other end is prodigal sons and daughters have sons and daughters, and they don't want their sons and daughters to go live the way they want to live.
Right.
And so if we can disciple them, let's call that the story of the elder brother, right? The brother that stays home. Yep. If we can disciple and reach them, that's a great mission field as well.
Yeah, I love that focus and that filter of how you're viewing your city and the people who are in it. According to the large amount of research that I did using AI, some 13.7%. Yeah, a lot of time and energy there, but around 13.7% of Cincinnati's metropolitan population is affiliated with an evangelical church. So you've got a lot of unique challenges and opportunities there. How are you going about ministering to such a diverse and largely unchurched community?
Sure. Well, AI got that right. That is the right percentage of our population.
Fantastic.
So they got it right this time. It is a little bit of an onion, though. So you got to peel back the layers on that. So It is a correct stat that there's only about 13% that are evangelical. But what you have is a city that has had a large and still has a large Catholic influence. So though there's very few evangelicals, there is a large percentage of in the Catholic community in our city. But then now this is the stat that goes more towards kind of like what we would consider our mission. Half are unaffiliated in our city.
Gotcha.
So they're not affiliated with any type of religion or, whatever faith expression. And so what that breeds, what it has bred, we see is a lot of cynical people when it comes to religion and
Sure.
church. A lot of skeptical, mistrusting, but yet there's also this undertone of church hurt of people who were in whatever type of church. A lot of Catholics who are now disengaged, some disenfranchised, and so people in Cincinnati. I'm talking about that majority. Okay, so you said the very small minority that are in the evangelical world.
Yeah.
They will drive right by your church and won't think twice about what is happening at your church. And this is real, true factual data, because we have a church building that sits on 5 acres and it has sat there for a long time. We bought it from a church that unfortunately dwindled. And I have met people in our community. Our church sits on the west side of town. We're just 15 minutes west of downtown.
Okay.
And they've lived in the community for 40 years, 35 years. And then we'll meet them and they'll go, we never knew that there was this building, on the back end of this property. We've driven by for 35 years, 40 years.
Wow.
So if you have in Cincinnati, now this may not be somewhere else, but in Cincinnati, or if you're in a city like Cincinnati, which is usually most Midwestern cities are kind of similar. If you build it, they will come mentality, you're going to be really disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Because you can build a nice thing and they'll just drive by. And you'll maybe put on a Facebook advertisement, new church in Cincinnati, and where that may draw attention in some other places. What someone may comment underneath that is, why does Cincinnati need another church?
Sure. Yeah.
And so, but that's a good opportunity, because that's a good question. Why does Cincinnati need another church? Yeah. And so that kind of like helps us to clarify why we're here. And so for us, that just goes back to, we can't be about what happens only in the 4 walls of our building. We have to be able to get outside of those walls. And then what I see in the parable of the sower is like, Jesus says, now whether this was a broad brush that applies to every time you share the gospel, I don't know. But in his parable, he says only 25% of the seed fell on fertile ground.
Yep.
And so we strategically try to focus on fertile ground. And I will tell you where we have seen a lot of gospel impact, and that is reaching broken people. People who, and for a myriad of different reasons, they would consider themselves broken. Maybe they're broken because they're in recovery, or they've been bound to addiction. Maybe they're broken because they have questions. Maybe they had a loved one who just recently diagnosed with cancer, or maybe they're struggling with mental health. I'm not to say that that's all of our ministry, but man, a huge part of who we are and who we're trying to reach is someone who would consider themselves going through crisis. And we want to strategically place ourselves in proximity of people who are going through crisis, and try to be the loving hope of Jesus in that moment. And what we have found is, where other people are cynical and cold and skeptical, they are more receptive, and we've seen God do some great things through that.
So you talk about, kind of trying to be strategic in placing yourself in places where people are broken and needy. For those who are listening, saying, what are some examples of how you're strategically placing yourself in that area, so that they can kind of get some ideas of how they might do it in their context?
Sure. I mean, in the 30,000 meta view, we intentionally targeted a community that is in proximity of people who are experiencing some type of brokenness. So that is not, again, I hope you hear this recurring theme. This is what we feel called to. This is what we feel like God called us to build. I'm in one of our suburbs of Cincinnati. Every school, every single one, elementary, middle school, high school, has a church plant in it.
Wow.
It happens to be like the highest wealth per capita in our community, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the really nice place to live in our community, and there happens to be, a church plant in every single school. I get it. I get it. Those people need Jesus,
Totally.
and there's a lot of them. And so God is going to call people to that place. I can't name you one school in my community that has a church plant in it.
Wow.
And so now, that's not to say that we don't have people of means in our church. We have always, in every single iteration of who we have always had a diverse socioeconomic mix of people in our church. And you could have business owners and people who were homeless 6 months ago sitting on the same row.
Which is beautiful.
It is. It is the coolest thing you've ever seen. But if you think you're going to do that in a hyper affluent community, it's going to be nearly impossible. But
Right.
you can see that if you live in proximity to, in this particular, what we're talking about is socioeconomic brokenness. And
Okay.
so the 30,000 foot view is you got to go to where people are. We intentionally planted in a community that was in proximity to brokenness. And then, probably more down to the nitty gritty is just like, all right, are we going to be a church that truly welcomes the person who is in recovery? What does that look like? I would tell you at times it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think about a couple months ago, you know how the pastor always, there's problems in the church and people come to the pastor. Hey, pastor, we got to fix this problem. All right, here was the problem. Here was the problem at Revive City Church a couple of months ago. There were so many people smoking outside of the door of our church that as people were coming in, they were like having to go through the smoke to get in. And there's a lot.
I love that, honestly. Personally, I love that.
There was a lot of people, and I'm with them because I don't want to go through the smoke to go in. A lot of people are like, hey, like we got to fix this. Okay. Now, when I answered the person, I gave them an answer of what I'm talking about now. I said, number one, I'm so glad that is happening because that is a fulfillment of our mission.
Totally.
That tells us we are on mission. We're reaching people. The reason why they're smoking is because they're trying to alleviate a habit and a vice that is worse than nicotine. Not to say that nicotine and tobacco is not a bad habit, but they have other habits and vices that are worse. And this is something that helps them in that journey. So I'm so glad that is happening. And number two, not every church is going to do that. And again, I'm not called to pastor every church, but for Revive City Church, we will designate an area over here. And I bought an ashtray on Amazon, an outdoor ashtray, and we designated an area for people to smoke at our church. Now, maybe that is rank heresy. But for us, it's living in proximity, making proper choices and strategic choices. I don't want to enable, but I want to live in proximity to that particular community because we've seen God do miracles and work revivals. And let me tell you, you want to get a church excited. If you're lacking enthusiasm and engagement in your worship, have 25 people in recovery sit on the front row in the front section of your worship service and watch energy be injected into your worship. So those would be things that you got to just be willing to strategically live this way. And sometimes it can be uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me sometimes, just to be honest with you. Again, I'm not going to, I don't think I've crossed over into sin or enablement, but I definitely 100% believe that it's an indication that we are fulfilling who God has called us to be.
Well, and the truth of the matter is, no matter who we are, when we come to faith in Jesus, everything isn't changed all at once. Like it is a growth process, and the more broken of a person, if you want to use that terminology, that we're reaching, the more steps they're going to have to take. Some do just give it up all at once, right at that moment, but for many, that's not the case.
Right.
So
let me flip the metaphor. So, we talk about that type of broken person. Well, there's somebody, and your church is prim and proper, and nobody smokes, and everybody dresses nice, and their hair is cut good. But the young men in your church are being ravaged by pornography.
Yeah, you're right.
And you can either choose to ignore it and sweep it under the rug and not talk about it, or you can say, hey, we're going to have a Bible study this week, and it's going to be on pornography and lust. And you're going to be open and say, we're going to help people who are going through that brokenness. And here's the class. Here's where it's going to meet. It's the same concept. You're not enabling, you know what I mean? You're not condoning the sin, but you're saying we're making a place for people who are having that struggle.
Yeah, and that's the thing that pastors have to be willing to do, is to step up and say, okay, we know it's gonna be messy. We know we're gonna have issues, but it's about walking people through these things and helping them learn and grow and mature. So you obviously you are reaching people with a various amount of issues. So how are you going about training and equipping your congregation so they can confidently share their faith with people who are far from God?
Yeah. And I mean, those issues, again, are a myriad of issues. Some of their issues is they worship travel ball more than God.
Oh, yeah. I know. I feel that too.
So there's lots of different issues, but you get the point of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, and this is not me saying that we are like a complete attractional model, but I think a powerful lever is the gathering of the believers. Yeah. And I think a way to reach lost people and empower our people to reach lost people is to create a welcoming environment, to invite people and to leverage that. It's not the only reason that the church exists.
Sure.
I think it is a primary reason why the church exists. It's not the only reason why we gather. I think it is a wonderful reason why we gather, to invite those in. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that like in a seeker sensitive way. And if you're called to that, a recurring theme, I'm talking about what is our direction. But just truly a welcoming. I don't mean that in a, you can be anonymous. I don't mean that in a, you're walking in and so dark you can't see everybody. I don't mean it that way. I mean it from a hospitality. I mean it from a place of, here's the way we say it. We say church is not like a family. Church is a family. And so for us, we want it to feel like a family reunion. We want it to be that type of welcome. And so that's a huge part of fostering, creating a church that reaches lost people, is creating a place where they can invite lost people. And then when it comes more on the strategic discipleship side and training side, we have something. It's not new. It's been repeated. We call it Growth Track. We made it our own. We have a 3-step process, and that 3-step process is hyper intentional on connecting people to the church, cultivating their spiritual gifts and their spiritual life, and then commissioning them to go reach people. And so those classes are long. We're not, again, they're not seeker sensitive. The first one I have usually lasts 3 hours. It's a 3-hour long class. We provide lunch. We do childcare. We do it right after church when they're already there. Nice. And we take a lot of time to connect people and to our mission, to our vision, which of course we're infusing this idea of we're reaching lost sons and daughters. So we're taking 3 hours to do that. Then we want to cultivate. We want to see what the spiritual gifts they have. We want to see how they connect with God. And then see and help them to see that they're designed with a purpose, and that purpose is to be used by God. And then we're going to equip them. And I shouldn't say sometimes. In that teaching, like we'll do a 3 circles teaching where we're like giving them a practical tool, sharing their faith.
Okay.
But the largest part of that session is teaching them to know and to hone and to then be able to share their testimony. Because we feel like that's the most powerful tool in evangelism, is living in proximity of the 8 to 10 people you're around all the time, and then living the Christian life and then sharing your testimony strategically, and then drawing people to Christ that way. So again, big picture of like just having a place where people can invite their lost friends and family, and then, walking out of a growth track, 3 sessions, probably 10 hours worth of teaching in those 3 growth tracks. And it is hyper focused on, this is the mission. This is how God designed you to accomplish the mission. This is how you go fulfill the mission. Now let's go do it. And then plugging them in to all the different areas of the church life, and then sending them out to go reach people.
And I love that it is somewhat of a time commitment to go through this, to learn and to, be equipped to do that. Because when you get somebody involved in that and they're willing to go through that, they've caught on, they mean business, they want to reach their community and change the world. And that is, a powerful tool to be able to use.
They got skin in the game. They have skin in the game. And then we work on the back end so that when they come out of that, they're coming out of it to be commissioned, to be activated. And that takes work. And so we got someone who's in charge of that. We have people who are connecting people and getting them plugged in. But of course we've seen fruit from that work. And so that's why we do it.
So I think we've got similar mindset as far as like trying to make it easy for our people to invite and bring their people to church services. So can you kind of give some ideas about how you balance being culturally relevant while remaining biblically faithful when you're reaching a post-Christian audience?
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I don't know that I'm the poster child. I think, in the 12 years of our existence, maybe we've vacillated to one side or the other, maybe in the attempt of being more relevant. Our methodology has vacillated. And then in maybe the correction or in the emphasis of trying to be theologically astute and sound really, really smart, we've vacillated to this side. So I do think the struggle is part of the process. That if you get to a point where you're just super comfortable with where you are and you can't challenge, hey, is there areas of growth on one side or the other? I think the struggle is indicative of balance, right? The struggle is almost like equilibrium, where like you can bring it into balance. I think some keys. Here's 2 words that just come to my mind when you say that. Number 1 is authenticity, and number 2 is consistency.
Okay.
And I could probably translate that as to be real. Don't be weird for weird's sake. Now, there's stuff about the Christian life is just weird, right? Like we're talking about drinking Jesus's blood and eating his body. Okay. Yeah. And that's okay. If people stumble over that, that's okay. Yeah. That's weird in the sense that it doesn't make sense to someone who's unregenerate and their eyes are blinded. And it takes the work of the Spirit to open their eyes to that.
Well, and even in Jesus' day in John 6, when he's talking about they got to eat my flesh and drink my blood, and the disciples are like, why are you saying this?
Exactly. Exactly. So like, we're never going to be so culturally relevant that when you say things like that it's just, everybody's going to go snap their fingers and say, wow, you're just so cool. Yeah. But then there's also just like, we just do and say silly stuff that's not consistent, that's not authentic. Many times you don't live that way Monday through Saturday. You don't talk like that Monday through Saturday. So why are you putting on a show? Why are you putting on a performance because it's Sunday? And so us is like, we're going to be authentic. We're going to be consistent, and we're going to preach the Bible. We like unapologetically, our topic is the Bible. Now, there are so many topics within the pages of scriptures, but the message will come from the word. And that has helped us when we have vacillated to say, all right, are we being authentic? Are we being consistent? And are we on message? When you think about traditions, all right, what are traditions? Most traditions in churches are something that happened in a way to reach people or be culturally relevant at one time.
Yeah. Sure.
Right? At one time, someone thought, let's get 100 people and they're going to sing at the same time and they're going to sing the same notes and there's going to be an arrangement to it. Because, there wasn't always choirs in churches.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's not how they always did worship. And one time someone said, we're going to do this. And it worked. And it worked well. What happens, it works so well, the church keeps doing it over and over and over and over again because it works so well.
Yeah.
Until it doesn't. And a tradition is we're going to continue to do it even though it's not working because it did work at one time. We've done it so long now, we're going to become a tradition. Now, I'm not talking about biblical tradition. I'm not talking about doctrine.
Right.
I'm talking about methodology. And so for us, it's like you got to be willing to change your methods, but not your message and not the mission. And now with that, now here's the big one. Okay. So the question is, how do you remain like culturally relevant and also like biblically faithful? Yeah. You have for both of these, you ready? Here's the answer. You got to be willing to lose people.
Oh yeah.
You have to be willing to tick somebody off. You have to be willing to say, I don't like that. In either direction. I don't like that because they consider that culturally relevant and against their tradition, or I don't like that because that's archaic. That's from the Bible. That's old school. And if you can tick people off on both sides of that conversation, you're probably going to be relevant and you're probably going to be biblically faithful.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Because you are going to lose people for sure. Especially when you step on what they view church ought to be, those traditions as you touched on. So I know that you are.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was like, by the way, the people who are creating the cloud of smoke on the way into church, they don't care. They don't care. You can preach as hard and biblically faithfully, and they don't care. You can be hip and cool. They don't care. They're not arguing. They're not sending you the emails. Right. We didn't do this or we did that. So for us, again, staying on mission. It's methods change, the message doesn't, and the mission doesn't change. And that keeps us pushing forward.
And, I heard Carey Nieuwhof say something years ago, and he was talking about you can either focus on the people you want to reach or the people you want to keep. And that really changed the way that I viewed ministry, where it's, I was worried about, what if I say this and then this family leaves, or what if I change this, how we do this, and that family leaves, and it's like, yeah, but who might you possibly reach if you do what God is calling you to do? So, but I know you're not afraid to address real life issues, whether it's depression, addiction, gender identity, broken relationships. So what are maybe some things that you do to ensure that your message resonates with longtime believers and those who are new to faith?
Yeah, this is an area of growth. So first of all, I have to do this. So this is like, you don't like baseball. I bet you like college basketball. You like college basketball at all?
Yep, okay. Basketball and football, yeah.
Okay. So like the NCAA basketball tournament, men's basketball tournament, like pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
And it is survive and move forward, right? So
yep. Yeah.
If you are going to have a church that reaches lost people, but also you're going to disciple people and you're going to have people who are mature in their faith, and you're going to reach a diverse group of people in all different ways, you're going to have to do both. You're going to have to address needs and struggles and areas of reaching people who are lost, who are broken. But at the same time, you are going to have to feed the sheep, and you're going to have to create the taste of longing, of learning, and going to the deep end of the spiritual pool. So for me, it's like it's an area of growth, but I'm willing to go through the process. I'm willing to flex those muscles, because if I don't, I don't see us moving forward. What I get naturally. So if someone's having this conversation, I think the first thing you got to ask yourself is like, what do I do naturally? What I do naturally is address the needs, the practical applications of someone who's lost or someone who's broken or struggling. I cut my teeth, teaching kids, teenagers, college students. I've been preaching since I was 15. So and even though I've been, lead pastor at Revive for 12 years, the majority of my preaching has been to kids, teenagers, and college students. Yeah. So what I do naturally is make application to where people are. Okay. You have to do that if you're teaching kids, you got to make it a kid understand it. You can teach them teens, college, you got to apply it to where they are. So that's what I do naturally. What I have had to work at is how do I do that at the same time helping the person who's been in the faith for 30 years, and they have heard probably the passage you have preached on 5 times before.
Yeah.
How do I help that person continue to foster their spiritual growth and discipleship and that vitality of their spiritual life? And so I think that's a commitment. That's a commitment to do the work. That is hard work. That is like going, you know this better than me. That's like going to the gym, week after week after week. It's not easy, but you do it because you value it. Yep. So that's the commitment. For us, it probably looks more like 85% to what I'm used to and what's default, what I'm good at naturally. And then the hard work of making sure that 15% of that message is we're willing to go in and talk about the theological truths that are robust. And by the way, going back to what we talked on earlier, if you have a commitment to actually teach the Bible, it's there. It's in every, and it doesn't matter how you do that. I've done it all. I've done topical, expositional, all the above. But the commitment is, what is the text? And yes. what does the text? So if you're doing a topical and you're preaching on anxiety, okay, where does the Bible speak on anxiety? Okay, now let's go to that text and let's expound that text. And then out of that, you're going to talk about how do you deal with anxiety. You see what I'm saying? And then in there, it's going to be robust. And there's going to be something for the 15% who've heard it 5 times before. And there's going to be something that God's going to use and grow them. And then again, what I personally think I do naturally is like, I'm going to be able to apply it in a way that the teenager, the college student, the recovery community, the lost guy who got dragged to church by his girlfriend, can relate to.
And one of the things that you're touching on and talking about, relating it to these different groups is understanding who is sitting in front of you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for pastors and ministry leaders who are listening to this to understand that relevant means relevant to the people who are sitting in front of you. Mm-hmm. So like, for instance, the church I was at in Iowa was very, very traditional church. And there were people in that church who wanted me to speak on homosexuality all the time. And I'm like, but there's probably a very, very, I'm not going to say there's not anyone who's struggling with that, but it's like the percentage is so small, but you want me to talk about this every week and you want me to ignore your pride and your gossip and everything else. So when we're speaking about being relevant, we're not saying you have to talk about transgenderism if that's not an issue that's your people are dealing with right now or your community's dealing with right now. It's knowing what your community needs.
Yeah, and it's, again, a commitment to faithfully teach the Bible. So if you're going to walk through, right now we're walking through Matthew. I know I'm coming to the passage where Jesus says he made them male and female.
Yeah.
I know that passage is coming. I will not shy away from it.
Yeah.
But
which is one of the things I love about you.
Yeah, I won't shy away from it. But last week was do not be anxious. Well, I don't have to try to fit in transgenderism into the do not be anxious message.
Right.
I can just preach, don't be anxious.
Yep.
Don't worry. Let tomorrow worry about that. I can preach that. And no, I'll be faithful to the text. And then when we talk about he created the male and female, not shy away from it. And the person shows up that day and goes, man, why did you pick that sermon? Is it, or you got a beef? You got this is a bully pulpit? No, I'm just preaching the Bible through it. And by the way, you don't have to do that expositionally like that. You don't have to preach through Matthew or you can just faithfully say, all right, here's what we're talking about. Here's maybe I would recommend having a sermon calendar. So you look at your year and say, even if I'm preaching topical, here's the topical message throughout the year. And we're going to give people a balanced spiritual diet. And then whatever day that day falls where you're talking about that issue, that's the day. It wasn't a bully pulpit. It wasn't, I saw this on social media, so now I'm going to preach on it. No, I'm just preaching the Bible faithfully, and we'll cover those things. And by the way, this is where you got to teach your people as a pastor. My pulpit ministry is a marathon, not a sprint. Do not judge the content of what I preach over the course of 3 months. Base it on the course of 3 decades of preaching.
That's excellent. Excellent. So thinking about 3 decades, all right, let's look ahead for a little bit and just as we get ready to close out the episode, what are some of your hopes and plans for expanding Revive City's mission to reach more lost individuals in Cincinnati and beyond?
Yeah, I'm in a really wild, crazy growth movement that I didn't know that I was going to see. I prayed for it, hoped for it. If I'm being honest, in the beginning, I just thought it would be like this from the beginning. And that was a lot of my pride and ambition. Yeah. And I felt like a lot of the roller coaster was self-induced. And I thankfully I just came out on the other end of the roller coaster, committed to stay. And now I get to see some of these like things that I thought would happen. But when you were going up on the roller coaster, I didn't know if they would happen. Yeah. So like if you'd have asked me this, so I'm trying to speak to the pastor. Maybe you're on the roller coaster right now. And you're like, I don't know if I'm going to see days like this. If you'd have asked me the same question 3 years ago, it would have been a wildly different answer than right now. Right now, we're like, we ran out of room. We remodeled a gymnasium. We ran out of room in the gymnasium. We had to create more, preschool rooms. We went to 2 services. We're trying to expand our parking lot. We're in a growth expansion phase.
It's awesome to see what God's doing there right now.
It's wild. You can just go on our Facebook page, revivecitychurch.com. And then on there, you click find our Facebook. You can just watch. You go back 3 years and you see pictures, and then you come to now and you go, what in the world happened? Yeah. I do think, and I haven't changed, by the way. All this stuff we've been talking about, I've been doing for 12 years. I felt like we got a little bit of a strategy 3 years in, but we've been doing that consistently for about 9 years. Yeah. And it's only been in the last year, 2 years that we've really seen the fruit of it, by the way.
Because it takes time.
It does take time. And the Lord is working. The Lord is so much about the journey. He is so much about the journey. And so he's working on all of us during that process to get us to where he wanted us to be. And you have to endure the 9 years of this to be able to get to the place where you're in the place where he wants you to do. And there's no way of not walking through that 9-year journey to get to where you are now. In our case, it was a church that we bought from another church that had declined. So, we couldn't have bought that 9 years previous. Yep. But we had to survive the 9 years to get to the place where God wanted us, to where now, when these things have been put into practice over time with trust and credibility of doing it for 9 years, now God is opening the doors for new things. So I say all that to say, man, at one time it would just been like, how do I preach next week? How do we try to put out the fires of set up and tear down? That would have.
I'm in that right now.
Yeah, yeah. Every week there's a fire, and you're a firefighter. We did volunteer appreciation awards, and one of the awards we got a fire extinguisher, and we called the person. We gave them the firefighter award because they always put out a fire on Sunday morning. So that's what that'll look like 3 years ago. Now it's like, how do we expand? How do we raise all the money to expand the parking lot? how do we expand without leveraging tons and tons of debt? We're trying to think that through. How large can you grow on a 5-acre piece of property? Just realistic, how do we effectively use every square foot of our property?
Yeah.
That's what we're thinking through now. But I want to come back to, like, even if we grew to be a church of 5,000, which I don't think we're going to be unless God does something supernatural, right? I think if you planted 50 churches, you would have more of an impact over the course of 100 years than building a church of 5,000.
Yep.
And so I would love to see Revive City Church be very, very stable in a place to where we could either bring in or raise up a movement of missionaries, church planners and church planting missionaries that we send out. And if God gives me 20 more years, how many people could we send out on mission, and how could we impact lostness that way? That's really what. In this other work, yes, it's to reach people here and to disciple people here, but it's also to think through who are the next people who are going to be sent out. And I think that's the greater impact for me. And so that's why I'm partnering together with, North American Mission Board Send Network. That's why we've sent out planters from our church, and we'll do that again. And that's why I love talking about church planting, because I really feel like that's the plan A to expand the kingdom. I can't be so focused on that I forget about what it means to pastor people. But I can't be so in the weeds on pastoring people that I don't see the big picture of the kingdom of God. So yeah, that's how we plan to expand. Just figuring out the logistics of expansion and growth, and bigger parking lots and bigger buildings, but also multiplication of mission and missionaries.
Yeah. And I love that mindset. If people have questions, or they want to connect with you more about this or about church planning, maybe Send Network, North American Mission Board, or just what you have going on with Revive City, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Yeah. The easiest way that I'm fully comfortable with sharing to the world is hit me up on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, at Pastor Kirkland, and slide into my DMs, and we'll go from there. And I'll share my number from that point, and you can get a taste of kind of what we do. And by the way, I would love to talk with anybody, whether it's a pastor. Man, you're going through the roller coaster of the brutal nature of ministry. I'd love to just encourage you, tell you all the things I did wrong and how God was merciful, even though I wasn't very smart.
Yeah.
Or the person who's brand new and they're thinking about stepping out and planting a church, or maybe you're looking for a network. Whatever it may be, please reach out. I would love to connect with you guys, and I'll get you on the calendar, man, and we'll hang out. If you want to come to Cincinnati, we go out to lunch or go to a Reds game, and we can hang out that way. And that goes for you, sir.
Yeah.
It's about time you come back. It's about time you come back. Yes.
I agree.
I think we should hang out.
Make the trip north, but it'll be in the summer for sure.
And I don't blame you for that, by the way. Or I can come see you in the winter. Either way, it works fine with me.
Perfect. There we go.
Yeah.
But appreciate you making yourself available to other ministry leaders. You can reach us here at the Pastors Connection Network by going to pastorsconnectionnetwork.com or finding us on Facebook at Pastors Connection Network. And Kirk, thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy, your wisdom with us today. I sure appreciate the conversation.
My honor, man. So good hanging out and talking with you again.
And thank you for joining us on the Pastors Connection podcast. May you be inspired and equipped to lead with grace and purpose until we meet again.
Yeah. Peace and blessings.